Welcome to Storytime Animated, where the darkest tales come to life. Tonight, we venture into the shadows of a forgotten place, a place whispered about in fear, where the boundaries between reality and nightmare blur. This is the story of Blackthorn Asylum and the horrifying secret that waits within. Prepare yourself for chills, as we unravel the legend of the Hollow Thing. Remember, these stories may be animated, but the fear? That's very real. Are you brave enough to continue? Let the story begin. Deep within the isolated Whispering Pines forest stood Blackthorn Asylum, abandoned for over 60 years. The locals avoided it, speaking in hushed tones about the screams that lingered long after the fire. The fire had consumed more than the building, it devoured the sanity of those who dared to venture inside afterward. Ethan, a young journalist hungry for recognition, had grown tired of covering mundane stories. He wanted something extraordinary, something to propel his career to the big leagues. When he heard about the asylum's grim history, he was hooked. Tales of a creature called the Hollow Thing, a shapeless horror that preyed on fear, made it perfect material for his documentary. Ethan was joined by his friend Riley, a skeptic who loved debunking paranormal claims. Together, they packed their equipment, cameras, audio recorders, and flashlights. The plan was simple: spend one night in the asylum, document everything, and leave before sunrise. The journey through Whispering Pines was unnerving. The deeper they went, the quieter the forest became. Birds fell silent, and even the wind seemed afraid to whisper. When the asylum came into view, it felt like stepping into a nightmare. The structure leaned precariously, its stone walls blackened from the fire. Vines snaked through shattered windows, and the iron gate hung open as if inviting them inside. "Creepy enough for you?" Riley joked, but her voice wavered. Ethan didn't answer. He was already recording, narrating the history of Blackthorn Asylum. Built in 1912, this institution was infamous for its inhumane treatments. Electroshock therapy, lobotomies, you name it. But the real horror came in 1963, when a fire broke out, trapping everyone inside. No survivors. He paused, panning the camera to the charred entrance. Legend has it, one patient, known only as Subject H, had become obsessed with a hollow god. After the fire, sightings of a shadowy figure began. Locals called it the Hollow Thing. Riley snorted. Classic campfire tale. Let's see if your shadow monster is home. They stepped inside, their flashlights cutting through the suffocating darkness. The air was damp and heavy, carrying the faint smell of burned wood and decay. The floor groaned under their weight as they moved deeper into the asylum. The walls were covered in graffiti, but one word stood out, scratched repeatedly into the stone: hollow. "Creepy, but still just vandalism," Riley muttered, though her grip on the flashlight tightened. The duo ventured into what remained of the main hall. The ceiling had partially collapsed, letting moonlight pool onto the cracked tiles. In the center of the room stood a single chair, impossibly untouched by time. On it sat a doll, handmade and grotesque. Its face was stitched unevenly, with empty sockets for eyes and a mouth sewn wide into a disturbing grin. Who brings a doll to an asylum? Riley scoffed, but Ethan didn't respond. He was fixated on the doll, filming it from every angle. Suddenly, a faint noise echoed through the room, a dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. "Did you hear that?" Ethan whispered. Riley nodded, her face pale. Probably a raccoon or something. But deep down, neither of them believed it. They followed the sound down a long corridor. The walls here were different, scratched and gouged as if by claws. The deeper they went, the darker it became, as if the light from their flashlights was being swallowed. At the end of the hallway, they found a door marked Room 213. Ethan hesitated. "This is it," he said. "Great," Riley muttered. "Let's get our footage and get out." The door creaked open, revealing an empty room. Empty except for the same chair and the same doll they had seen earlier. "That's impossible," Riley whispered. As they stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind them. Their flashlights flickered, and the air grew icy cold. A low, guttural hum filled the room, rising in intensity. Shadows gathered in the corners, twisting and writhing like living things. The doll fell from the chair, landing with a sickening thud. Then, the shadows formed into a figure. It was tall and impossibly thin, its limbs jerking unnaturally. Its face was featureless except for a single hollow void where a mouth should have been. Riley screamed as the thing lunged forward, its movements disjointed and unnatural. Ethan grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door, but it wouldn't budge. The creature's hollow mouth opened wider, emitting a sound like 1,000 voices whispering all at once. "You came to see. Now you'll never leave." The shadows surged toward them, enveloping the room in complete darkness. 3 weeks later, a pair of hikers stumbled upon Ethan's abandoned equipment near the forest's edge. The footage was intact, and authorities reviewed it, hoping for clues. The video showed Ethan and Riley exploring the asylum, their nervous laughter masking growing fear. But in the final clip, the camera captured a figure standing in the corner of the room, just behind them. Its hollow face stared directly into the lens. The recording ended with Ethan's panicked voice, "It's real. God help us, it's real." Neither Ethan nor Riley was ever found. Locals say the asylum now hums at night, an eerie melody that draws the curious closer. And once they enter, they don't come back.